Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keeping It Real with America's Supermom. I'm excited about my next guest. I have Sara here, and we actually got acquainted through V Team Referral Network. So I'm excited to have her have a great conversation about being a thriver. And we'll get more into that as we go through the interview. But before we get started, I want to give Sara the opportunity to introduce herself.
Hi, Lachelle. Thanks so much for this lovely opportunity. I'm looking forward to our conversation tonight. My name is Sara McCready, and I'm the owner of Illuminated Joy. It's a wellness practice. I'm a Reiki master, light therapy practitioner, theta healer, and intuitive mentor. So I started my business at the beginning of 2020. Just before the March announcement that changed everything. So
Wow.
I have started my business in the pandemic.
Wow. Well, that is just amazing. So, with the type of work that you do, is that all virtual? I mean, do you get the same impact you think being virtual? Was
Yeah.
that your plan, or how did that happen with the pandemic?
Yeah. So totally not my plan. This for me was primarily going to be an in-person service business and seeing clients, face to face. However, I was aware that the work could be done remotely. So through Zoom calls, through telephone calls, that sort of thing. So I knew that was a possibility. It wasn't one that I wanted to explore until I was forced to do it that way. So I was able to open my doors in September of 2020. So I was doing some online work, marketing type of stuff in the summer, but really opened the door to seeing clients in September. And we were shut down in December, at the end of December. So basically January and February. So I pivoted everything online around February, March. So that's when I started seeing clients through video calls.
Wow. Now, so that's just awesome. So tell us, the journey, because, to start your own business, you go through this self-doubt. Is this the right time? And all these different things. You jump out there. What was really that process? And then, what did you learn about yourself during this?
Yeah. So starting a business under regular conditions is stressful enough. And I have not started a full business on my own before. So this was a whole new experience. And then having it coupled with government restrictions and whatnot, it's been really what I call it brings you to your knees. I find that this work, doing the energy work, reaching out to clients, doing a business online, sharing your story in a very public forum is, like I said, I find it really brings me to my knees. There's days where you do have to dig so deep into your self-confidence and into your abilities and that belief in yourself, like knowing without a doubt that you can absolutely do this work and bolstering yourself up to be able to do it. That's been the biggest challenge for me is knowing that I can do this and then actioning the items. It's one thing in person. I'm super comfortable in person. I love meeting new people. I love hearing their stories. I love interacting with people. And when I started to do this online, more from the marketing perspective, so sharing your story online, I found it really challenging. Like I was surprised at how vulnerable I felt, even though it was stuff I would say in person or in a group of people. I still found it like I was really inhibited to put myself out there and share information online. So that's been the biggest lesson, is
Mhm.
getting over myself and continuing to share.
I love that. And so, for many people, we all have different stories about, moving forward in business and getting out there and taking that plunge. What advice would you give other people who are just like on the fence and trying to have that safe, everything lined up? What would you say to them?
Yeah. So I work with a business coach. I work with Jennifer Lyle, actually.
Hmm.
So I would say start before you're ready, that
Mm,
there is no good time. So pandemic or no pandemic, it's always going to be uncomfortable, and it's always going to be a stretch for your personal beliefs and your confidence, and
mhm,
putting yourself out there. Like those are the areas that you're going to grow in, regardless
mhm,
of whether you're doing your business online or in
mhm,
person. So
mhm,
starting before you're ready,
mhm.
because there's never a good time.
I love
And
that.
and having that support. So the reason why I mentioned Jennifer's name is because having a coach, I
Mhm,
have found to be critical, and joining groups, business groups that help support and connect your work
mhm.
that's also been key in the last what's it been, 6 months for me.
I love that, because coaching is something that a lot of times we don't consider. We just kind of gravitate to family and friends. Oh, I'm starting a business. We look for them to support us, and they may not be capable of doing the right
Yeah.
type of support when it comes to having a business. So, when you're
Yeah.
looking for a business coach, what are some things that people should be looking for?
Right. So I heard this expression recently, and it was, God placed the idea, that purpose, on your heart. He didn't
Hmm.
place it on your mom's heart or your dad's heart or your sister or your brother. He didn't place it on anybody else in the family. He placed it on your heart. So
Hmm.
that's your purpose and your passion to pursue. Working with or trying to turn to family, like you were saying, for that support, they're not going to get it. That
Hmm.
passion wasn't placed on them, it was placed on you. So yeah, they might be able to offer some emotional support, but in terms of helping you drive a business or launch a business, you want to get a coach that resonates with you in
Hmm.
terms of what your practice or your business style is.
Hmm.
So I'm working primarily with intuitive coaches,
Mhm,
and coaches that support uncovering beliefs, like those limiting
mm,
beliefs.
mhm.
Yeah.
I love
So
that.
it would depend on, I think it really depends on your type of business, because there really is a coach for every style of business.
I love that. Yeah. Now, so you mentioned that you're a thriver. So talk to us about that term and what that means.
Yeah. So I started my business. It was going to be a side hustle, actually, because I had left a toxic relationship. And through that departure, I had what I describe as an emotional breakdown. I
Mhm,
was mentally, physically, emotionally grieving and
mm,
in despair. And I also was at a point where I had begun to really question my choices. So
mhm,
I had been told about a Reiki practitioner,
mhm,
and had not ever experienced Reiki myself. So I went and had Reiki, and which is a form of energy healing. So I had a number of sessions over a 6 or 8 month period. And it was through my experience of the grieving and going through the trauma and healing the trauma that I learned how pivotal energy work can be in propelling your recovery. And so the reason why I say I'm a thriver is because I have moved from surviving. I was surviving a traumatic breakup. I was surviving a traumatic relationship between myself and this person, but also in the working environment that I was in. So there was a lot of surviving that I was doing. Like I was getting through the days. And through this energy work and the recovery, the trauma recovery, I am fully thriving now. And that is what has allowed me to be able to launch this business and be able to have it thrive as well. Because if I'm not thriving, then nothing else around me is going to be thriving. So that's what I share in my practice is how to go from surviving to thriving.
I love that. And, you mentioned a couple key things. I think the first thing is, that you left a toxic relationship, and most people don't grow up to say, oh, I want to be in an unhealthy, toxic relationship. So you get in the relationship, and of course, it's not what you aspire to be in. But talk to us about, what it was that gave you that final push to leave, to change your mindset about this isn't going to end up like I think it should end up.
Yeah.
I am just going to walk away. What was that like? And how did that happen?
Yeah. So for me, it was not the first time I had ended up in this style of a relationship. It was actually the fourth time over a 25-year period. So I saw similarities between the other three relationships that I had been in. And I also was becoming physically unwell. I was having troubles breathing. I had like 4 rounds of antibiotics in 2 years or less. And I'd had like a bunch of bouts of bronchitis, which I'd never had before. So I recognized that I was physically breaking down. I wasn't sleeping, and when I was sleeping, it wasn't very restful. And I wasn't, again, that's the surviving aspect of it, right? Like I was not performing or enjoying life. I wasn't living life to its fullest because I was physically and mentally breaking down. So it was because I was becoming so physically unwell. That was really the catalyst for me to say, I know I deserve to be healthy. And I know that there is something more to this than what meets the eye. This isn't just about another round of bronchitis. Like there's something deeper happening here. And so that's what started me on the path of fully healing, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all on all levels.
That is just awesome. And, I definitely can resonate with what you're saying because I went through a period of depression for 13 years and I was hospitalized 3 times. And it was after that third hospitalization, I was like, there's a pattern here. And right. I'm the common denominator, because we come up with all these stories and excuses and, it's so disempowering when you do that. So you also mentioned grieving. And I think that's important to bring up because a lot of people are like, what is she grieving? How is that even in the scenario? But, to me, it sounds like grieving a relationship or a story that you were believing that was going to be the fairy tale ending or something. So talk to us about your grieving. What was that you were actually grieving?
So it's a little bit about the relationship, but as I discovered through my healing process, it was more about everything that had happened in 25 years of life. So, so for me, it was a marriage, and it was the first marriage, and I was 46 when we had gotten married. So, and it was very short. The relationship was very short. So I was grieving the end of a marriage, which was a very significant milestone for me in my life. I had spent my entire life focusing on my career. So I was fully a career woman and had invested all my time and energy in the corporate life. So for me to have gotten married, it was a very significant piece of my story that I had developed about how my life was going to look. And so when I finally did get married, it was, like, okay, this is it. So when it became obvious that I was not in a healthy relationship and that I was becoming more and more unhealthy, that was the beginning of the grieving process. What transpired was that through my healing, I was realizing that, because there was a point where I couldn't stop crying. So I had been crying for, I don't know, like 5 months or something. And I knew that things were really serious at that point. And it was like, it was like spontaneous crying. Like I would not be doing anything. I'd be at my desk trying to do my work and I would just start crying. So I knew that there was major emotional work to be done there. I just didn't realize that it was part of the grieving process. So grieving the relationships before, even though I had, transitioned out of them, and, I had grown after each one of those other 3 relationships, and I had healed as well, there was a level of healing that I hadn't gone to yet. And there was emotional work that I hadn't dug into, and that was being asked of me by the breakdown of this relationship. So basically, I was being called to do the inner work on a much deeper level than I had in the previous, 20 years of my life.
Wow.
So it was grieving of my childhood, grieving of my previous relationships, grieving of when I met my ex, I had been at a place of employment for 13 years. So it was grieving the loss of that job. It was grieving the loss of my marriage. It was basically everything that had transpired to that point in my life that was being let go. And the way that I was letting go was through the steps of grief.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, and that is so powerful, because so often we think that we are maybe moving on with life, having a fresh start, but we have these unresolved issues that just keep growing and growing and getting bigger, and we don't even realize it. We're thinking we're in another direction, but this big mountain of mess is right behind us, like a calling card. So I love that. I mean, I think that's just so many people just think you can forget things that happened in the past and move on. And I mean, there's a difference with certain things you do, but there's that clearing, or, you just have to resolve things for whatever reason before you can build a new foundation, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right about, you think you've done the work, but really it's just waiting for you on the other side. And that's exactly what happened in the previous 3 relationships. I definitely had some grief, but it was always, I figured out what my part had been in those relationships, what I had contributed, and I moved on.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't recognizing the pattern, like you said, me being the common denominator. I wasn't recognizing the pattern that kept showing up in all of those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And the pattern was the lack of boundaries, which is one of the most significant pieces of development you need to have in a healthy relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
I just kept, so although I was learning other lessons from those other relationships,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't learning one of the most significant ones. And that showed up in my work as well. Like in
Mm-hmm.
the corporate jobs that I had, that lack of boundaries shows up there as well. It's not just in your romantic relationships. It shows up in all aspects of your life,
Mm-hmm.
particularly if you haven't developed or formed strong boundaries.
So
So yeah,
I totally
that was
resonate with that. Yes, because I was the same way. Okay. People pleasing, no
yeah,
boundaries. And it's like, and then, I think the hardest thing for me was to forgive myself, because it's like you notice the
yeah,
pattern and it's always, looking out to other people. Oh, they did this to me and I'm a victim. But when you take that accountability, it's like, man, I just didn't speak up for myself or I didn't
yeah.
do whatever. So you have to forgive yourself.
Yeah. And that was part of the grieving process too, right? Like
Hmm.
I had to
Hmm.
grieve for me and for the
Hmm.
choices that I had made and accept
Hmm.
responsibility for that.
Hmm. Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
So now you've moved forward, you're thriving and helping other people. I think this is great. I mean, I resonate with that so much because, I can't go back and get those 13 years,
Yeah.
but I can do something about it now to help other people, to help them avoid some of the pitfalls that I went through.
Yes.
So I think it's great to be able to take those lessons and to begin to transfer that information to other people. So I think it's great. So what advice would you give people who, I mean, some people may not feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to start a business,
Yeah.
but what is the peace or joy or something that you get from doing what you do that you think is just surrounding you being able to take those lessons and share them with others?
Yeah. Um, the biggest piece is in my business name, Joy.
Mm,
So the reason why I named my business Illuminated Joy is partly because of the lights.
mhm,
So I have a light system that I use. They're infrared lights and colored lights.
mm,
So that's where the illuminated part comes from. But joy comes from the aspect that there is joy in your life, and
mhm,
there is joy after you've gone through the grieving process, and you can experience joy again. There was a time where I truly did not think I was going to smile again. I had
mhm,
been, like I said, crying for months. I
mhm,
couldn't smile if I wanted to. I just did not have any happiness inside of me at that point. And I had experienced joy and happiness prior to this happening. So I knew that I knew joy, and finding out why it wasn't present in my life anymore. And then when, like we've just talked about, the boundaries and discovering all that and taking responsibility for myself, knowing that joy is at the end of the rainbow, that there
mhm.
is joy to be had. So, sorry, I lost the thread there a little bit on your question.
Yeah, so you were just talking, you answered it because you were just saying that you have gotten back to this joy as a result of what you're doing now. And,
Yes.
pretty much being able to share that with other people. I think that's so great because, we kind of have this idea that I've tried everything, nothing
Yes.
is going to change. And you just kind of have a pessimistic view. But I think it's great to be able to show people that it doesn't matter how long your journey might have been, and without joy, you
Yeah.
still can have joy.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
And being able to share the energy work with people who are coming out of these types of situations,
Mm-hmm.
that is the joy for me, being able to help them transform their perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
bring them that peace and that relaxation, help them get clarity on why the situation occurred the way that it did.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all key pieces of my purpose now.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody, I believe, that has gone through some sort of toxic relationship, like I said, whether it's romantic or a friendship or work, wherever,
Mm-hmm.
when you're coming out the other side of that, having somebody to share that experience with in a healthy way and in a way that helps you move forward
Mm-hmm.
is why I know now it's why I've gone through what I've gone through, so that I'm able to help work with women in particular, but anyone that has gone through that type of experience that is looking for assistance or support in
Mm-hmm.
moving out of the grief through energy healing.
Mm-hmm. Love that. That is
Yeah.
wonderful. So, I mean, this has just been a great conversation. I think that for so many people, especially now with this pandemic, having joy, finding joy is something of a foreign language to many because of, their jobs might have
Yes.
changed, loss of family members,
Yeah.
or, the list can go on and on. So I think it is
Yeah.
so needed right about now and greatly that a lot of people are seeking for this. So I think it's great that you're here today. So, what is the best way for the audience to get a hold of you?
So my website is in development at the moment, like as we
Mm-hmm.
speak. But I am on Instagram at Illuminated Joy, all one word,
Mm-hmm.
lowercase I and J. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm on Facebook. The Facebook business page is Illuminated Joy, and it's capital I and capital J,
Mm-hmm.
and it's two separate words. And I can be reached, so you can direct message through either of those platforms,
Mm-hmm.
or my email is illuminatedjoy, all one word, at outlook.com.
Awesome. And tell us about some of the programs and things that you have
Yeah.
briefly before you give us your final thoughts.
Yeah. So I absolutely agree with what you just said about now more than ever, people needing this type of service. So I offer a healing modality, an energy work modality called Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
I also offer another modality called Theta Healing.
Mm-hmm.
And those can be done either in person or remotely through Zoom calls or phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have a practice here at my house, and so I see clients in person now. And yeah,
Awesome. Now, and where are you located?
so I am in Ontario, Canada.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So, what final words of advice, encouragement, whatever you feel led to share with the audience today, would you like to leave them with?
Um, don't be afraid to reach out.
Mm,
That any type of help, be it counseling or energy work or psychiatry, like whatever that might look like for you, grief counseling,
mhm,
whatever that might be for you, don't be afraid to reach out and
mm,
get that support, because there is more layers
mhm.
to the process than what appears on the surface.
Love that. Great, great advice. That is so true. So, this has just been a wonderful conversation. And I'm so glad that you came on to share that. This is always a great topic, one that I am very passionate about because I believe that, a lot of times it's our own mindset and limiting beliefs or self-sabotage that really stops us from moving forward and having the life that we desire. So
Yeah.
any antidote to that, I am all for, because I suffer from that myself for years. So I'm definitely passionate about that. So, so glad that we got connected. Thank you so
Me
much for
too.
coming on and sharing your wisdom and insight with the audience.
Thank you so much, Lachelle. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. And thank you for providing this forum to share this information and talk about health and wellness.
So true. And it's sometimes one of those taboo conversations, which you would think is just so unusual, but yeah, it happens. So
Yeah.
we are so glad that all of you were able to join us today. We hope that you really benefited from the information. And if you did, feel free to share it with others. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments and I'll make sure that Sara gets them. But in the meantime, we want to thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode. And we will see you on the next one. Bye for now, everybody.
Bye.